a huge welcome from the Global Health Academy of the University of Edinburgh to this meeting. And I say meeting, it's not a webinar strictly, because it's a meeting place where we're going to share ideas so that we can progress on this common problem that we've all got with COVID-19. I mean, it has affected us pretty much on every front, but the medical education front is very critical, because regardless of whether other businesses are required or not, in this pandemic, we need more healthcare professionals, we need more doctors, and this is the capacity that we've also got to deliver for the future. So I'll tell you a bit, Professor Liz Grant will tell you a lot more, in fact, about the Global Health Academy, but very briefly, could I get people to switch their mics off, please? So the Global Health Academy aims to foster networks, strategic partnerships, and communities of practice. So we are here, a community of medical education practice, and we are extremely privileged to bring you all together in this common humanitarian cause, which actually spans beyond the boundaries of politics, beliefs, and hopefully at the end of this session, some of us will be able to come out with more solutions that we'll be able to pick up from other colleagues who are going to be talking and sharing ideas. So my humble request is that if you could please switch off your mics unless you're speaking, it would enable the speakers to get their points through. If you would like to come and contribute during the question and answer session, please put your video on and we will bring you in. And in fact, please send a message to Professor Turner, or please send us a message, and Professor Turner, who's the chair of the meeting, will bring you in. We are streaming on YouTube as well, so you'll have an opportunity to view the session live, or people who may not be able to come in to Zoom, they'll be able to see on YouTube, so please let them know. And on that note, I have to say it's a huge privilege for me to introduce our distinguished chair, Professor Neil Turner, who is a professor of nephrology at the University of Edinburgh. So he's a practicing clinician, full-time, more than perhaps me, Ali Mehdi, orthopedic surgeon. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. And Neil is also the Dean of Undergraduate Teaching and Learning at the University of Edinburgh. So I will hand over to Neil, who will conduct the proceedings today. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Ali. It's a real privilege to be here today. And I have to say, last week's session was really fascinating with different views from around the world. I don't think anywhere that doesn't benefit from sharing experiences like this, but it's particularly valuable, I think, that the range of experiences that we have here today, with a really wide distribution of people, and actually some really impressive speakers too. The way we've lined up this morning is that we've got a series of really quite small talks, quite short, and inevitably they will overlap a bit. But we wanted to make sure that we bring across very broad experience from a lot of different places. I hope that the speakers will one by one say a little bit about themselves at the beginning, including pronouncing their names correctly. If I get them wrong, apologies, in this multinational environment. But you'll see from the program that there's a lot of really valuable, experienced expertise coming online here. And later on, if you're not on the list of speakers on the program, I do want to highlight that there will be an opportunity to give us maybe 2 minutes of your local experience. And if you want to do that, please put your name and that you'd like to do that and where you're from in the chat, and I'll send some reminders in the chat, and we'll pick that up later on. And of course, questions are very welcome too. I suspect that the questions during this early part of the webinar should be really concise so that we get through all of the talks, because I think that some subjects will come back and some questions will come back too, but maybe we'll pick out 1 or 2 at the end of each short segment. Does that sound okay, Ali? That fits the plan?
Yep, sounds good.
That's excellent. So in this short series, we thought we should start out by setting the background, some issues around platforms available and some of the sort of principles in moving teaching to online, which we've all had to do, but we've had to do it in very, very different environments with different students and different availability of resource and so on. And so Dr. Rita from Tehran is going to introduce that to us from the beginning. And Rita, please do just give us a few words about your background before you do that. And perhaps you'd like to share your screen now with the slides.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Turner. Let me share my slides and then I will go through my presentation. And also, as you said, I will introduce myself. Okay, hello everybody, and firstly I should thank Dr. Turner, Dr. Ali Mehdi and their colleagues that have managed such a webinar. I know that it needs a lot of work and I appreciate it on my own, okay? My name is Rita, I'm from Iran, Tehran. I'm a physician MD, in my background, and I have PhD in e-learning planning. Now I'm working on developing a national LMS MOOCs platform for Iran. I'm the core investigator and core responsible body of the project, this national project. And I'm trying nowadays to handle the issues that we have nationally in Iran regarding e-learning dissemination and usage during this corona crisis time. Okay, let me start my presentation. If Dr. Turner, may I start my presentation?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you, Doctor. Okay, in this short journey of 7 minutes, I'm going to go through 6 frequent misconceptions regarding e-learning principles. Okay, so as you may know, when we are thinking of an e-learning system, we should think of some components. One of them is hardware issues, something like servers, internet access, and so on. Of course, we should think of software issues, LMSs, virtual classes, softwares, MOOCs platforms, social networks, and so on. They are necessary for providing e-learning to the students. And the most important one is instructional design, which is, if we want to make it simple, it is answering the frequent WH questions in English wisely in order to achieve the best possible, please pay attention to the word possible, best possible educational effect, okay, not the ideal one. And then we should think of regulations, rules, incentives, and so on. And then at the end, we come to a component that if we don't think of this, we will use all of our efforts, and that is the capability of our e-teachers. These capabilities include subject matter expertise, pedagogical expertise, and technical skills. But in our experience in Iran, and I have heard in several webinars nowadays that this is the same in other countries, we have a big challenge with teachers, and that is because they don't have enough role models of being e-student. In opposite of, I can say, so many role models as being students, they cannot understand in some instances what e-learning is or what e-learning is not. And they have questions about that, and they try to implement their own experience for their students. And because they don't have so many role models of being a student during their studying and career, so sometimes they don't know different ways of delivering e-learning or e-course to the students. So in this brief lecture, I'm going to look at e-learning principles from the standpoint of e-teachers and the challenges and misconceptions that they have. Okay, so let's go fast through these 6 misconceptions. And I try to talk about them very shortly, and during question and answer, if there are any question, I would be glad to answer. Okay, the first misconception. Sometimes teachers say, I only need Zoom or some tools like that, for example, Adobe Connect, Big Blue Bottom, and so on, to run my classes. Is it a true concept? Is it a true concept? Actually, no. In e-learning, you say that e-learning is not equal to synchronous online learning. We always recommend teachers to think of asynchronous formats of delivering a course. And in my surprise, sometimes I say to our teachers that it is easier to be a teacher in an asynchronous platform compared to synchronous one, because when you are running your class in, for example, Zoom, you may encounter technical issues. You don't have time to handle them. And also, you should be a powerful teacher to be a good teacher in an online class, because you don't have the face-to-face interaction that you are adapted to, and you should deploy various strategies to to have the attention of your students, and you should be a perfect teacher to run a good class in online classes. So that was the first misconception. The second one should develop multimedia or video contents to be able to deliver an e-course. We hear that teachers, they demand recording video lectures or creating multimedia e-contents so that they can be able to cover course objectives. Is it a true concept? No. E-learning is not equal to e-content, regardless of the type of the content. It could be multimedia, video, or any other types of e-content. E-contents are a part of e-teaching, not equal to it. So if you prepare some videos and you deliver it to the students and say that that's enough, I have finished my task, this is not the case of an interactive e-course. You should think of course objectives and learners' needs so that you can choose the proper content for them. I just put an example here. Imagine that you are going to teach a subject to PhD or residency students. Do you expect them just to listen to a video lecture and then everything is finished and the course objectives are fulfilled? Of course, you say that this is not the case. For PhD students, we prefer them to study the original reference books or articles. So it is possible that in your LMS platform, you introduce a textbook to them, whether it is an ebook or not. They should go through each chapter of it, each subject of that textbook, and then during synchronous or asynchronous activities, you discuss these chapters with your postgraduate students. So that could be another solution. So when you are going to be an e-teacher, this is a principle that you should be innovative and you should think of the type of your content. And the best solution always is not the multimedia. It could be other types of the content as well. Okay, the third misconception. We hear nowadays a lot that some teachers claim that I don't like the university's LMS or any other platform, so I cannot teach well. So the problem is the software, not me as a teacher. Okay, this is not a good excuse. We shouldn't forget that we are the ones that govern the technology, not vice versa. And a good e-teacher and a good teacher as well makes the best out of the accessible technology. Okay, so we try to help our teachers to forget the technical aspects of the technology. As far as it is user-friendly, that's okay. You can make best of it. Maybe it is not the ideal format of teaching that you desire, but it could be the best that you can do for your course. Now let's go to the fourth misconception. We hear a lot that teachers say, I need to upload files with larger sizes and variety of formats. I need to run a lot of synchronous classes and so on. When we are saying that, we have forgotten that we are the provider of the education, and the students are the main concerns who are the users, and we should think of their facilities. Do they have suitable devices? Do they have good internet access? If you upload huge files, can your students download them? Can they afford the price of internet they need? So that is what we sometimes our teachers don't consider. We are sitting in our offices, in our home with good internet access and facilities and devices, and we all forget about our students, especially in developing countries like mine. This is an issue. This can be an issue because our students, of course, for example, in Iran, almost all of our students have smartphones. But in rural parts of the country, maybe we don't have a very fast internet access, okay? So we should consider this point. Okay, let's continue our journey to the 5th question. I don't have enough experience. What are the 3 key factors for a good e-teaching? This is a frequently asked question, okay? They want to know some tips for being a good qualified e-teacher. I would tell you some points that are important for delivering e-course, especially when we are not so expert as an e-teachers. First, don't overload students with information and tasks, especially in asynchronous formats of e-teaching. You encounter that professors, instructors have uploaded a lot of content, a huge amount of information, and lots of activities and tasks. Don't forget your course objectives. You should be limited in your course objectives, but because especially in asynchronous formats, for example, a course via an LMS, you don't have the limitation of time. Sometimes it happens that students encounter a lot of information. Study this is good. Study that is good too. You know, and in this case, the student will lose the main objective of the course instead of learning it. The second point, try to be interactive. The interactivity could be defined as learner-learner interactivity, learner-teacher interactivity, and learner-content interactivity. Regarding the third, that was learner-content interactivities, there are some simple tips. For example, when you are recording a video, you can ask the students a question and ask them to pause the content and think about the answer. That's a trick for being interactive, and the student can interact with the content, and he or she can imagine that he is in your real class. And the third point, make the best out of the blending. And here we come to the last point, last misconception that I am going to go through, and that is the misconception that blended learning is combining e-learning and face-to-face classes. Yes, this is blending, but it is just a type of blending a course. For blending your course, you should be innovative and smart. You can blend different contexts and platforms regarding your in concurrence with your course objectives. That could be face-to-face, LMS-based, MOOCs platforms, Zoom, virtual augmented reality, social networks, and so on. And maybe within a course, you can see that an intelligent professor has used 3 of them for fulfilling different objectives of the course, okay? So this is another misconception that is really important when it comes to medical education, because it is not only the matter of clinical skills, but also we would like our learners to be capable regarding critical thinking, clinical reasoning, communication skills, and so on. So some of these platforms would work for some of these skills to fulfill the objectives. And as the last sentence, I tried to cover shortly 7 frequent misconceptions that you encounter when you are trying to disseminate e-learning and you are not working with volunteers, because before Corona crisis, mostly there were teachers and professors who were volunteer to do e-learning activity. But nowadays, because of Corona crisis, every faculty member has to do something in virtual world because universities are closed. So you see that some of them, they don't like e-learning and they find excuses even, or they think that the problem is somewhere else rather than their instructional design. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have found this 7-minute journey useful. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Turner.
Rita, thank you very much indeed. Tremendous overview. There's some really interesting things coming up in the chat. Some of the questions, though, I think would be better deferred until we've heard one or two of the other presentations. Questions, please turn off your microphone, anyone who's joining. Some of the questions, for instance, around are we going to return to normality? What is the place of lectures in a modern curriculum? Anyway, we can come back to later. Come on. Perhaps the organizer could mute everybody and then I will unmute. And some really interesting questions about class size and how we manage that I think we will return to. But Rita, I just want to ask you one question now, because we're going to hear a bit more about platforms from the next speaker. Would you like to say just a line or two about the Virtual University of Medical Sciences, which you pointed out your alliance to, because that sounds absolutely fascinating.
Okay. Dr. Turner, in our universities of medical sciences in Iran, they are under the supervision of Ministry of Health and Medical Education. There is a big difference between our universities and other parts of the world. And non-biomedical universities, they are under the supervision of Ministry of Higher Education. So whatever I tell you is about the universities of medical sciences that I'm working in the first rank University of Iran, Tehran University of Medical Sciences. You know that because of different reasons, one of them was, for example, sanction issues, we decided to develop a national LMS, okay, and a national MOOCs platform. And all of our universities of medical sciences during this Corona crisis were ready regarding infrastructure and platform for practicing e-learning and e-teaching. So they had their own LMS. Each university had its own LMS before Corona crisis, and the LMS was launched to student record systems of that specific university as well. So when the Corona crisis began, every single faculty member who entered the LMS, his or her own university's LMS, he could see the list of the courses he had in this semester. And there remained the issue of capacity building and faculty member development skills regarding e-teaching skills. You know, somehow we were ready regarding infrastructure. We had prepared a good hardware and a good free software for our faculty members and students to working. Okay, and also we have some platforms like Zoom, like Big Blue Bottom, and Adobe Connect that we use for synchronous parts of the course.
We are going to hear a little bit about platforms just next, but it's very interesting to hear from countries where things are very centrally set out and controlled, and we've got others here and at all different stages of development where things are a little bit more open to local variation. So Rita, thank you very much indeed for that. Dr. Kauser Ali from Karachi in Pakistan has very kindly agreed to give us a little bit on the actual e-learning platforms. Thank you for starting to share your screen. So Kauser, please just give us a couple of lines of introduction to your background in this, and then we'll love to hear it. Thank you.
Okay, so hello, assalamu alaikum, good day to everybody. Frankly speaking, I do not have a background in e-learning, but I was thrown into this by virtue of the emergency crisis that came in. We were not very strong on e-learning. We have one virtual university in Pakistan, but all the rest of the many universities were blended. But my university was going full-time, face-to-face, accepting some postgraduate programs. So we started with emergency remote teaching, and me being the chair of the Institute of Medical Education, it came on us to, you know, develop policies, train personnel, develop personnel, and identify and procure what would be the relevant platforms to have in our institution. So obviously, along with the IT department, we have a very good IT department. So we started working on it and started our journey to quality online education. And that's my introduction to e-learning. I was not a person who was very much, you know, fond of online education. But now we are all working very, you know, on the same track, because I don't think that even post-corona, things are not going to go back to the traditional ways of teaching and learning, and the new norm is going to be at least quite a lot online education that will keep on going. So as Rita has very nicely elucidated on the different components that you know, are important for e-learning, I'm not going to talk more about that. However, I would like to talk that one thing that is very important is institutional commitment, because this does require a lot of investment. And of course, the other thing that is of utmost importance, and what I am going to talk about, is technology. So, my talk over here is basically try to introduce, I mean, many people may be knowing about it, but through my journey, I was introduced to the software and the platforms that we are using for LMS, and I will just give a brief overview of what I have learned, trying to finish within the time that has been allocated. So we all know that we have heard a lot of LMS in education. There are many more, actually. I have just selected and put on slide few that are used much more than in education. So Google Class, as Rita has said, Google Class is something that is being used by majority of the institutions, basically because it is free and it has got, it's easy to use, and you can use Google Docs, Google Platform, then they have Google Meet, which can be added on into it for synchronous learning. And I think one of the very important things that I learned about Google Class was that all the interactions and all the learning that takes place in the synchronous environment gets recorded. And that is available to students who have not been able to attend the synchronous session, and the resources they can use it later. So Google was something that we are using, Google Classroom. Then, of course, Moodle is being used by many postgraduate programs now, which have smaller number of students. But since Moodle has more plugins that can be included into it, it's more like a learning management system, and I found it much more easier to work with Moodle than with Google Class, and therefore my preferred is of course Moodle. Then of course Blackboard is being used, but Blackboard is again paid. Moodle is open, but Blackboard is a paid platform, and we are not using Blackboard, but many institutions are using it because it is more robust and it has many more add-ons, more than what Moodle provides. Udemy is another one that is being used and for education, but I really like Docebo. Docebo is relatively more advanced because it uses artificial intelligence. And because of artificial intelligence, it provides many more features that I could not find in Moodle or Google Class. But of course, it is it's expensive. It has a you've got to pay a price for the advanced features. By the way, I had a disclaimer that I had to say at the start that I do not have a share in any of these platforms. And so I'm not promoting anyone. This is just based on my own experience of using it. And I would also like to acknowledge 3 of my junior colleagues who have been very helpful for me in developing this. Dr. Masood Javed, Dr. Syeda Zareen Raza, and Dr. Rizwanullah. They have really helped me in doing this. Is there some lines coming on my screen? Dr.
Yes,
Chana?
Dr. Syeda, we'll get rid of those lines. There you are.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. I got a shock. Okay. So once we have identified and we have selected what platform we are going to use for the online education, next, of course, the thing that we have to consider is authoring tools. Because in medicine, we don't only put PDF. A lot of medicine is concerned with videos. We want to demonstrate things to students. And so we use a lot of video authoring tools. So of course, one that is again free, we always go and look for the free instruments first. The debut screen and video recording software we have tried and we have found it very useful. However, it has one shortcoming that we are unable to edit whatever we record. So once we record something, we are unable to go back and edit it. So in order to overcome that, we tried Camtasia. And Camtasia is really very user-friendly. We found it to be very user-friendly. And one thing that was very good in Camtasia was that we could also go back and edit, what we are doing. And Dr. Zareen just informed me that when she is using Camtasia, she uses a screencast, and in a screencast, she can put questions, and then she can program the presentation in such a way that if the student answers the questions wrongly, the Camtasia screen takes it back to where that is being explained. So I think that is an amazing instrument, and I'm going to use it again. The next software is Filmora. Filmora is also not very pricey, and it gives us some not as professional as these at the like Articulate or iSpring or Adobe. These 3 softwares that I've shown you at the end are, I think, quite expensive. Adobe requires a lot of professional expertise. So if you have somebody who is good at filming and has been doing videos, then of course Adobe will be useful. But other than that, for us, W Screen and Camtasia have been very useful. Next, of course, as far as we are concerned, we teachers like interactive synchronous sessions, and Rita has already talked about Zoom and Google Meet. But what we have used, YouTube is also a very good interactive software to use, and you can embed it in whatever platform you have. Zoom, of course, we are all now used to Zooms by the webinars. Microsoft Teams is a good software to use. Google Meet is, of course, it comes together with the Google Suite. However, in mobile phones, one has to upload Google Meet separately. Big Blue Button, I have tried it as a plugin in Moodle and I have loved it. It is very, very good for me. I enjoy using that. So now I would like to summarize my talk, and I would say that what we have learned is that whenever we are trying to use any learning management system, some things are inherent to the system, and we have to look at that. And when we are trying to select a system, is it easy to operate? How easy it is for the faculty, for the teacher to upload content, whether it be PowerPoint presentation, videos, audios, PDF documents, coursework, assignments. How easy it is. It has to be the first thing. Second is that it is able to communicate with a number of interfaces. Like it should be able to, students have a variety of interfaces. So the elements that we are trying to use should communicate with laptop, iPad, tablet, mobile phones. So that is something that we look at. Third, of course, very important is course statistics and report. So you have to select an LMS which provides you with statistics about how many students have attended, how many students accessed the material, when did they submit assignments, what is the due date, etc., and generate reports of students' progress and profile. So that is another thing. And last but not the least is security and privacy. It is very important to have confidentiality of students' data, students' records, assignments, etc. So that is something you have to have a LMS that has good security. The other things that are beyond the software, the platform itself, are of course the price. How much price is your institution ready to pay for that? The internet bandwidth is very important. Some of our students are in rural areas where it's not possible to have a good internet bandwidth. So we have to use a system that is something that can be accessed by students everywhere. And again, presence of a team. We have to have a good team. LMS is not something that can be done by faculty. Well, they can do it, but when we are talking of quality, we have to have a team of IT experts, instructional developers, and faculty members who have been trained into doing it. And I hope when we consider all of these things, then our dream of having a quality online education using the e-learning technology to its maximum will be possible for us. So thank you very much. This is the talk that I had, and I'll be happy to share questions later on, take questions.
So thank you very much. It's actually in some ways particularly valuable to have the insight of someone who's had to learn from scratch and doesn't have all the bias of someone who's been doing this for years. That was you certainly brought up all of the things that we use in those lists, and you highlighted some of the really serious problems. I suspect that probably we should move on and come back to the questions. There's quite a few questions running by in the stream that will cross multiple topics there. I was particularly interested that you picked up the ability to see which students are engaged and how much, and there's a question around what you should do with that information when you pick it out. Quite a few questions coming up in the chat about assessment, and I just want to point out that that is actually the topic of the next webinar. So some really important questions are out about how to do assessment in this environment. We should mostly aim to deal with there. And the other very important area that is the subject of the webinar after that is how do we teach and assess practical skills? How do we run the very face-to-face practical techniques that we would that are perhaps harder to imagine how to do online? Really important questions, but there's probably plenty of material for today. I think we should move on to Professor Chalam from Hyderabad. Would you like to share your screen, Professor Chalam? Very heavily involved, I know, in medical education in India, and you might want to say just a couple of lines, please, about that before you start. And it's been a privilege to visit you, indeed, in Hyderabad in the past. You're going to talk about the practicalities of lecture on small groups, and then later on, I think we might come back to stitch these topics together. Thank you. You need to unmute, Professor Chalam. Sorry, the traditional cry.
Yes, I have unmuted myself. Thank you, Dr. Neil Turner. Thank you very much for your kind words, and we still remember your visit to our college, and we are very, very privileged to have you in our college last year or 2 years back. And I thank all the organizers and University of Edinburgh, Ali Mehdi and Neil Turner for their opportunities which they are giving to us for participating in the global education. Thank you. So today I've been asked to talk on the delivering lectures small group e-learning platform. To do justice to the time and also the content, I'll be skipping through some of the slides, but just that is for information. Online educational activities are going on in COVID area. There are so many educational activities are now happening in COVID area. Here, I wanted to bring out one interesting point for all the educational research people who are interested in educational research. Here, we have a peculiar situation in the world now. In many countries, these curriculums which were designed for on-site and campus-based learning, when the curriculum was designed, unlike online distance education. And suddenly we had an unanticipated situation where the colleges were closed for physical distancing. Now, the online the curriculum which was designed for on-site implementation and designed in that way is being implemented as online curriculum. Very interesting, because we have to really, if someone has interest in educational research, can do what happens when a on-site based designed curriculum is implemented online. That's what is actually happening now. Now, what is happening? Students, faculty, and institutions were unprepared, so they were forced to do this. Here, we are taking a lot of interactive lectures. Every institution is taking, but they don't have this recorded. There are some institutions which are preparing recorded lectures and slide decks they are giving. Very few institutions have prepared modules also. Why I'm talking about this is preparation of modules takes a lot of time. And if you, that is very common in an online distance education pattern and online distance education curriculum, which is takes into module. But here we are unprepared and we are trying to learn now. Luckily, there are a lot of research and well-researched publications are there on principles of learning, and I thank earlier speakers who made them very clear. This I mention only to recap. You all of us know that while we are taking a lecture, it is not just giving information. We have to be more at a higher level, gain attention. All these steps have to be followed, and everyone know what are the good teaching practices. And luckily, all these practices which were researched and accepted in classroom teaching are also applicable for online teaching. Most of it, 90% of that, are applicable for online teaching also. But when we are taking online classes, to summarize, I wanted to just tell in very few words in the given time what is required before the class, during the class, and after the class. So before the class, there need to be a lot of preparation. For example, you have to create an active and harmonious learning environment. This is very important. What is active harmonious? The student has to be prepared to receive, learn. You have to set the goals, motivate him, prepare the environment, and pre-study material, learning resource. Everything has to be given on hand and he has to be prepared. And teachers also need to prepare the content, delivery, lesson plan. It has to be meticulously planned by the teacher. The another important aspect which is there for online, which is not there in our regular classes, is technical support. Like we should have good bandwidth of internet, uninterrupted power, because this may be look very small for a well-developed country. But in countries where still, many countries, still internet having a wide uninterrupted internet with wide bandwidth is little problematic. We have 150 students in our classroom. In one class, we admit 150 students. When the students disperse into 150 places, so everyone need to be connected. So technical support is very important. Now, in the class, we know we are all taking classes in so many years. We are very good teachers. I know that. We know what is interactive lectures, and the media, whatever you use, PowerPoint or interactive board, it has to be prepared as per the principles of media learning. We know that it is well, like how to prepare media. There should be more of pictures, less of text. All that principles, we all know about that. We have to prepare. Always try to divide the class into groups, and it should be interspersed with activities. And read the student. That means we should be able to see the student. In fact, we are using GoToMeeting. All the platforms have been discussed, but in the GoToMeeting or Zoom, whatever, you have to see the students, ask the questions in between, ask them to reply you back. So you should read the students whether they are interested, they are not, whether they are weaned off or what. So we have to bring back the attention of the students like that. This is, of course, part of the interactive lecture. Then you have to give some assignments at the end. Please conduct a wrap-up quiz at the end, whether maybe the MCQs or short answers, whatever. What happens, this will also be a feedback for you, feedback to the student, formative assessment, and also it is a motivation to learn. Now, after the class, what happens after the class? We have to follow it up, be connected to the student, follow up assignment, and compliment the people who submit their assignment, encourage them, encourage the student, acknowledge the achievers, communicate. The most important is be connected. So this is very interesting word, be connected to the students. I use it many times. Be connected is a very broad term. See, mentally you should be connected. You should know what they want. You should know how they like to be taught. You should know where they are, how much they know, what they need, what guidance they need. So this is what I feel is this is very important. Be connected to the student. Now, small groups teachings, I don't want to spend much time on that. There could be different groups like buzz groups, think and pair, share, circle of voices, etc. But we all know that we'll move forward. The events which happen in small group include seminars, tutors, clinical case discussion, workshop, journal clubs, etc. Because we don't. But here I will spend some time. This is, we have provision for breakout rooms in some of the platforms which we have been discussed. Especially some of our colleges are using Google and Zoom. They have in Zoom, they have breakup rooms. They go, what happens in the breakup room? We have to monitor them. So when the students go in the breakup room, the teacher also has to go into that and see what happens there, whether the discussion is going as per the required learning principles or they are getting deviated. There is some of the tools are there to monitor this. Some of these tools are note catcher. There is a Google Doc which can be used and it will record all their discussion because they will be in different 5 places and they will be discussing on, and these record can be followed by the teacher and intervene when it is required and when it is not required. Pre-assignments for discussions is very important because they have to be prepared to have a small group discussion. And at the end, please take a feedback survey so that you know you can modify what is going to happen for your next classes. Now, there are a lot of challenges in online teaching. Small group teaching also has challenges, which most important is demands a lot of time from the teacher, and we should have the skill of taking. Now, what is our experience? As I was mentioning, we have a curriculum. Suddenly, COVID has happened. All our students, our teachers were asked to take classes online. So we started implementing a campus curriculum into online curriculum. Students and faculty have very rapidly adapted to the new situation where they are very positive. Most of the faculty have learned how to take classes and they are taking classes. Students were very quick in accepting that new norm and they adopted, and students or faculty are both are very happy about this change and they are doing that. But when I spoke to, we have taken more than 1,000 classes nearly, and when I spoke to some of the students and we got feedbacks from the students, we got feedback from the student that they are missing campus environment. What is this campus environment? Because we know that they do a lot of things in campus except reading or studying, we know that. So the students are missing that campus environment, socializing, etc. We talk a lot about hidden curriculum. I am also a believer about hidden curriculum, which teaches a lot of attitudes and attributes, etc. What happened to this now? Now suddenly the hidden curriculum declares. And I felt that there is a lot of parental pressure on the students. Here, it is not like Western countries where the students are left there and they have a lot of independence in studying it. Here, the parents closely monitors the students and they sit. I have seen most of the parents sitting with the student and reading the books. So in this type of social circumstances, the parents are also sitting in the class. When we are taking online class, parents also wants to listen to that. And this created a lot of pressure on the student. They expressed that when they gave feedback on that. And I felt that when you are suddenly converting a campus curriculum into a online curriculum, faculty development programs are needed, and we can implement much better way if you have a faculty development program. Nothing is not called as, we can inculcate cognitive knowledge, psychomotor, and also we can teach all the skills also online. We can prepare modules, we can prepare a short video, show them and ask them to do that. Online, we can teach even all the psychomotor skills also. It is possible to teach. But only thing is we need a faculty development program, and also we need to prepare modules. So the curriculum itself need a modification if you continue to be on this online, right? So, and I acknowledge all these places from where I have taken the literature and study, and I thank the University of Edinburgh. Thank you very much. I think I'm in the 7 minutes or 8 minutes, which Ali Mehdi has mentioned, 8 minutes. Thank you, sir.
That's fantastic, Professor Chalam. Thank you very much. Again, I suspect that many of the questions running by in the chat, we might defer until we've heard all of the talks, but I just want to ask you one. It sounds as if you're running, with your whole class, some interactive sessions.
Yes.
Which sounds to me like it might be one of the most challenging things to attempt from the point of view of bandwidth and students' resources.
Yes. Yes, very interesting, because here, though we have 150 students, we will be knowing their names. So we have GoToMeeting class going on. Everyone will switch on their cameras, and we'll ask, they log in with their roll number, and we can see them in the screen, on the screen, and we ask them, okay, today you answer this, a swelling in the neck. So what could be the possible? Last week we have discussed. So tell roll number 100, Sweta, tell, or Kavita, tell. We usually call by name here, and we interact with the students. So we make it very interactive.
Yeah. I was also wondering, I think, about both the university's ability to deliver simultaneous streaming sessions like that through its own internet, but also, of course, students' ability to participate in a 150-member class.
Yes, we are using GoToMeeting, and we are quite happy with the way we are interacting, and everyone there is no connectivity issues,
Okay.
everyone is doing.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I must say I was particularly taken by your comment about the parents sitting behind the student and watching the lecture. You should of course charge them extra fees. But I think that is something that we will return to very importantly in the next webinar, which is about assessment, because then we definitely want to know exactly whose knowledge we are testing. Thank you very much. Should we move on? The next speaker is Thomas Chacko, who is also from India, but from Kerala, Tiruvalla. And the important question, which has been picked up by a couple of speakers already, around how to engage students with e-learning. Thomas, are you ready to share your screen?
Yeah.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a very good experience seeing people across the globe, mostly from developing countries, and to know that we are all in the same boat. So all the distinguished speakers, they spoke about the challenges and the new innovations that have taken place. I am in a new medical school, but I have been associated with faculty development program, the FAMR Institute, which is a faculty development program where faculty from medical schools and other health professions, educators, they come, and it's a leadership 2-year program. And now with the e-learning thing coming, we are suddenly faced with the challenge of, at very short notice, trying to shift from the regular real class to the virtual class. Um, so we are familiar with this, where we have been asking suddenly the teachers who have been used to the sage on stage kind of philosophical teaching to now the online teaching. Some of us were already, they had moved on to guide by the side kind of structure, but the problem comes, and it's almost catastrophic, when the sage on stage teacher continue their habit online as well. And then they blame everybody and the system and things like that. So my topic is engaging the learner, and through the few slides that and the short time that is at my disposal, this very important aspect to ensure learning is important to understand, because teachers, we feel that if we teach, students have learned. So that's a misconception. And so unless we engage the students in the learning system, then the learning has not taken place. So the double challenge is making sure that this happens in the online learning environment with which the teacher is not very familiar. It is always helpful for educators to have a grounding on the various learning theories, because suddenly faculty in your medical school could be facing some problems. And then we need to look at the lens of these theories to find out what's the problem, to make a diagnosis, so that we educators can then provide them with solutions. Since we all know that it is important to engage the students, it is important that we have to have faculty development program, the teachers told that they are used to the behaviorism theory, where it is mainly instructor centered. Some of them have moved to the adult learning principles, cognitivism, where the students are brought into activities to a certain extent. But the higher cognitive domains that we need to teach in our curriculum requires the constructivist theory, and the students need to be helped to construct new knowledge. And so the instructional design needs to be modified. Fortunately, we have found that the online management, learning management system is an even better method or medium to bring about this than the usual face-to-face. And the students, especially when we use the asynchronous form of teaching, where we have a curriculum design or an instructional design, which takes the students from simple knowledge to knows how and shows how and up the ladder. This type of curriculum design, where engaging the learners is important, takes place. For engaging the learners, there are many resources and tools available, and these have already been told to us by the previous speakers. I won't go into the details. So what is it that is possible for engaging the learners in the lower cognitive domain? So when you're planning an instruction for instructional design to build on previous learned materials and to engage the students in active learning, we have asynchronous as well as synchronous as well as different methods within each. The most popular that our faculty have found is to convert their PowerPoints into interactive PowerPoints, narrative. They add their own notes or explanation to the PowerPoint, and then they convert it into videos. That way, it is uploaded to the system, and the student can, at leisure, at their own free time, go through the material. If there are slow learners, then they can go back and forth with the slides, and that way it ensures the learning. Similarly, the good way of enhancing engagement, engaging the students is having a slide heading as animation, and then on clicking or before clicking, you ask the students, what do they think about it? You ask a question, what are the possible answers? And after you listen to them, then you show the slides. So that is the use of PowerPoint. The other thing is use of self-directed learning by the students, where the students are given the resource material, and in order to ensure that they have read the material, how will we know that they have read the material? So we give them assignments, ask them to draw a concept map, which we tell them that it will help you in revision. It consolidates their understanding in the form of a map in a single page. It's like a summary of their learning. And when they submit a concept map, we teachers know that they have gone through the material and they are not copying from each other the answers. So these are the ideas. And then Google Classroom has quiz, which won't go further unless the correct answer is given by the students. MCQs also gives similar way. I have found the use of muddy points. I have asked them to identify those areas which they read on self-reading that they could not understand. And so along with the concept map, they give a list of the portions that they have not understood. And based on that muddy points, the teacher then provides supplementary information addressing the muddy points that the students have. Or the teachers can give them short YouTube videos which are appropriate, 5 to 10 minutes, not longer than that. And this supplements and takes them from lower cognitive domain to understanding level. So the previous speakers have already spoken about the synchronous interactive lectures. Now for the instructional design for higher cognitive domain, we have to design in such a way so that the students construct new knowledge from what is already known. And that learning experience leads to a better learning and it is student-centered. The students get a change in meaning, and it involves activity on their part, and that enhances the learning. So we use, and the faculty is expected to use, and all these adult learning principles even in their design of online instruction. Engaged learning model is where it encourages collaboration that is triggered by a scenario where we present to the students real or potentially real learning problem, and then they collaborate and they engage in discussion and then come out with their findings or recommendations or their assignment answer. I have tried concept maps, and the concept map I will be showing later in the slide, and that has led to students getting engaged. They are motivated because they are doing this assignment which is related to a real life situation. It's similar to the flipped classroom model where the instruction on a particular topic, the students in the first step, what happens in the flipped class, the pre-class is mostly cognitive domain, simple knowledge, then a more elaboration by the teacher on the muddy points, on the areas that the student has indicated that they would like to know more. That part or the understanding is held by the teachers, and then the assignment is given so that the students then apply the learning. So this is a very systematic step-by-step progression of the student from just knowledge to its application. And especially when we give them an application that is related to real life problems, which they foresee they will be using in the future, then the engagement and interest increases. So I have tried with concept maps. It has come out and worked very well. And basically, most of our teaching now is in the learning management system through network. And so this particular framework I found, and I could construct an instructional design where the institution's IT department quickly set up the learning management system, the Google Classroom. The students and faculty are enrolled. Then it was interesting to add WhatsApp. We enrolled all the teachers and the students in WhatsApp group by the class. And then for communicating to the students who are far away in different places across the state, messages communicated about new assignments. We also motivate them. We also encourage them. So all that online socialization is important and achieved. And the relevance of the teaching that is going to happen in the classroom is emphasized at this stage. The next stage is motivating them to read on their own for further information that is already available. And we give and provide them with the learning material. And after that, facilitated learning happens, which increases their understanding, addresses their areas of weaknesses that are what they could not understand, and that enhances the understanding and total grasp of the subject that is being taught. And final assignment is about application of learning, which is the proof and evidence that they have been able to apply the knowledge to real life situation. And the important thing about the online learning environment is the learning platform being able to give individual feedback to each student, which was earlier not possible, or most of the times the teachers were not doing. So this online learning environment has made it possible to give individual students feedback on their performance. It is possible to give them another chance to improve their performance till the expected level is reached. And giving them grades is just an incentive to make them to learn actively. In order that we build the capacity of the faculty and make them involved themselves in engagement of the students, it is important that we introduce as a system student evaluation of the teaching. And the teachers are also told about the evaluation framework. What is what are the points for which the students would be evaluating. The good practices is used, and the teachers then know what is expected of them, so that the teachers' expectations of teaching and engaging the students is made clear to the teachers, and by that it improves the quality of teaching in the institution. It results in engaged, empowered learner, and evaluation of teachers leads to an environment of teachers who are capable of functioning in the new norm, in the corona world, in the virtual world. Here's an example of a product, the concept map that students prepared in response to there was a class on disaster management, and they were in the assignment told to prepare a concept map depicting how they would respond as disaster managers in their respective states. And they read up the background material, and they came up with different kinds of concept maps, and that was assessed, and it resulted in good engagement, meaningful engagement of the students. And the students then also said that it increased their confidence. And so learning designs, instructional design, done in a planned way, leads to better learning by the students. So namaste from India in the COVID era. Thank you.
Dr. Chacko, thank you very much indeed. I think, like many of the presentations, they could easily be a whole webinar in themselves. You raised a lot of topics there. There's a couple of things which I would like to come back to later on. Several people picking up, or actually in advance of you mentioning, the flipped classroom concept, which wasn't originally thought of as an online method of education in particular, but which is certainly very adaptable, and quite a lot of what we're doing may conform to it. There's clearly a number of people very interested in, you told us how to engage students, but maybe later on we can have a short discussion around what to do with the students who aren't, again, the students who turn off their video and pretend to be attending when actually they're possibly not. That's really great. I think we should flip continents and go to the last formal presentation from Angela Migowa. Angela, are you ready to share your screen?
Yeah.
That's excellent. So Dr. Migowa is a pediatric rheumatologist. I think I'm right, Angela, at Aga Khan University in Nairobi. Yeah. And you're going to tell us about the challenge in Africa.
Yeah. So good morning for those who are still morning, and good afternoon for those who are on my end. I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences in my home country and also in the continent at large. I hope I'm clear for everyone. So this will be my objective, just to shed some light on the challenges that we're facing in digital learning given this pandemic, and to appreciate the opportunities that digital learning has offered us, as was highlighted by some of our esteemed presenters before me. And I guess this is a topic for another day, but even as we endeavor to tap on into digital learning and the digital platforms, we should be cognizant about the physiology of learning. And as a pediatrician, for us, this is very key, where we know, especially with children, where one-on-one interaction is very important, even for things like language development. But what I wanted to highlight in this slide is that, as was highlighted also by Dr. Rita at the very beginning, is that our learners have got such diverse personalities. And sometimes, given that diversity, it might be a bit challenging to meet their unique needs, but some of the speakers have highlighted different tactics that we could employ in doing that. So at the university where I work, that is Aga Khan University, East Africa, in a sense, I think the leadership of this university started preparing us for the possibility of digital learning, because we have got 3 campuses in Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. And so for the past couple of years, we've been having several Zoom meetings where people discuss research concepts and even share their research findings. And I think at the time, even as we were engaging in those platforms, we never envisioned a situation where we might have to use this in our day-to-day teaching for our residents. So I thank the leadership because they already laid down structures that helped for us to transition, even though unexpected. But despite that, there are certain challenges that we still face. And as much as medicine is still a science, a greater part of it is actually the art. And that art comes from that one-on-one observation that you see your seniors or your colleagues doing as they handle patients. And this is a challenge now because of the concepts of social distancing. We have to limit the number of clinicians who are able to handle a patient at a given time. Because of that loss of contact, then therefore sometimes some of the mentorship soft skills that cannot be passed on through the digital platform is becoming a challenge to pass it on. We've also had instances where our students were residing in areas where there were possible high numbers of COVID cases. And our leadership and our government would then lock down those regions. So that meant that there would be no movement in or out of that region. So that has impacted some of our residents because they happen to live in those regions. So they're not able now to leave to come to the university, though we developed strategies on how to still continue with the learning, but that was a challenge. And then the other one that has also been highlighted by my colleagues is, sometimes there are non-verbal cues from your students that make you realize that they're missing the point, or you lost them in the whole discussion. And I saw in the chat, sometimes the students' camera is off, so you don't even know whether they're there or not. And I think that's a challenge that cuts across the board. And also for research, because as part of our master's program, the students have to carry out a research project, their master dissertation. And some of these research projects required one-on-one interaction with study participants and other co-investigators. So there are some students who have had to change their research topics and change strategy because we are not sure how long this pandemic would last, and that would ultimately impact on their progression, but we're doing our best to support them. But there have been opportunities, as has been highlighted. Now we have decided to go full blast with digital continuous medical education programs. We had our scheduled tutorials, which were initially done in person, one-on-one. Now that has gone fully digital. We have been able to carry out exam settings, standardization of our exams, and we've done that through the digital platform. And now, given that we are not sure how long the pandemic will last, we are already in the phases of discussing and putting in place systems to actually have digital examinations, whereby even though we are not able to have one-on-one interaction with the students, this could still happen. And it also does offer an opportunity for research. And I've seen from the previous presentations, there are lots of areas you could research on as regards digital learning and online education. I would then now want to shift a little bit and talk about the African continent. And as was highlighted in the introduction, I'm a pediatric rheumatologist and a member of the African League Against Rheumatology. And we last had our scientific conference in Mauritius in 2019. And at that conference, of course, at that time, we had no clue that Corona pandemic was coming. But at that time, the leadership of AFLER made a deliberate attempt to try and strengthen relationships and collaborations amongst the rheumatologists in Africa. And a decision was also made to establish the Pediatric Society of the African Rheumatology Association. And at that conference, which for me, I guess, is a learning point when I look back in retrospect, we took that opportunity to actually do a quick survey and find out what were the educational needs of our members. And I think for me, looking back, any opportunity that we get to be together in any forum, we should capitalize on it and maximize on it, because we never know when the next opportunity would be. So once we did the needs assessment, we were able to come up with like the top 10 priority needs, educational needs of our members. And at the same forum, we were able to quickly establish a WhatsApp group for our members. And that has gone a long way in strengthening our interactions and our communications. And from that group now, a subgroup was formed, which was like a task force group, to try and help implement some of the educational needs that arose from the quick needs assessment. And that was then a working group that then sat down to see how we could actually begin implementation of this online pediatric rheumatology continuous medical educations. But because, you know, as a team, we believe that the solution of a people's problem actually lies with the people themselves. As much as I'm from Kenya, East Africa, I might not understand very well the needs of the pediatric rheumatologists in Morocco, for example. So with this, we divided Africa into regions, and each region then has like a organizing team that will then be mandated to coordinate the sessions when the time comes for that particular region to present themselves. And as was already highlighted also, you don't want to do things blindly. So we also put in place infrastructure to monitor how well our educational sessions for pediatric rheumatology were progressing. Consequently, we're already on the pathway to establishing this society. In the next 2 to 3 months, please watch out for us on the digital platform. And then the other map on the shows the different regions of Africa that we divide ourselves into. And each of those regions then has an organizing team to help coordinate the learning sessions. And these sessions are scheduled to take place every first Wednesday of the month. And it's for about 1 hour, and everyone in Africa is free to log in and join in the educational session. So we had our very first session in June this month, and our esteemed speaker at that time was a pediatric rheumatologist from South Africa, Professor Chris Scott. And about 2 weeks before we had the session, an e-poster was designed, and we had about 2 weeks campaign on the digital platform to raise awareness for participants to log on to this online pediatric rheumatology continuous medical education session. It was very exciting, and I'll be sharing with you some of the feedback from the participants. And we also, you know, inquired from our participants what were the different levels of specialization. So we had a total of about 44 participants who logged on. And of those 44, 16 were able to give us their feedback. And the pie chart that you see there demonstrates those who actually enrolled and shared their feedback with us. When we looked at inquiring from them, because I said we had put in place a system where we were able to get feedback from our participants to find out, you know, how well was the session run and how could we improve on it. And you can see there that when it came to the objectives of the CME session, 69% felt that this was, they were very well informed. About 88% felt that the content covered was relevant to their clinical practice, and that the cases were relevant. 94% felt the cases were relevant, that the material was up to date, according to 88% of our respondents. and it lived up to the expectations, and they felt confident that they could apply their knowledge. So this was, sounds good, but there's always room for improvement. And the next slide shows some of the propositions that they highlighted or they offered. As I said earlier, we strongly believe the solution of our people are with the people themselves. So they say that we should clarify the objectives better, and they would like to have more case presentations. One of the other propositions was to have polls during the CME session. And after listening to the presentations by my predecessor speakers, I can see how that helps to have a more interactive online learning opportunity. And they felt that the session was quite engaged, and as was highlighted, we also need a lot of technical support. So one of the concerns was that we should also improve on the quality of our sound. I think that's the end of my presentation, and it was just to shed light on digital learning from a point of view of an institution where I work at Aga Khan University, and more on a continental front in Africa, as exemplified by the Pediatric Society of the African League Against Rheumatism. Thank you so much.
Angela, thank you. Such a fascinating bit of insight there. Can I just say, well, after this, we're going to go straight on to the questions, and then Professor Liz Grant is going to tell us a bit about the Global Health Network after that. So I hope the panelists, the earlier speakers, are ready to go with that. Angela, can I just ask you one thing first? I mean, it's amazingly impressive how pediatric rheumatology has been able to pull together across Africa like that. But I'm sort of guessing that you're quite a small group, pediatric rheumatology in Africa, and I don't know how many other specialties have been able to do that. Do you know?
So you're absolutely right. In the entire Africa, we have 15 pediatric rheumatologists. But when we opened up the membership for PAFLA, it was open not only to the rheumatologists, but even the pediatricians. So you're absolutely right. As regards other specialties, I'm not sure what is happening in that domain. I'd have to probably check up and see what other platforms are happening. I know about specific associations, like medical associations are having these platforms, but as regards specialties, that's when I'd have to do a bit more of checkup.
Yeah, maybe we haven't said enough about how much work it is. People have hinted at it, how much work it is for teachers to transform their teaching this way, particularly in a short space of time. And it really does highlight the strengths and advantages of, we've got some competition, the strengths and advantages of sharing resources with each other. And making the best of our working together, as we are doing here today, but there's much more to do. If the earlier speakers are all on screen, that's fantastic. I've tried to amalgamate together some of the topics coming up in the chat, and they will really cross the talks, I think. Just the first one. So there's been quite a bit of speculation about what we will go back to when this crisis is all over, and a refreshing number of people are convinced that there are real advantages to some of the things that we're doing online now. And so I think I'd like to ask the question of, when we go back to not having to have a lot of restrictions for COVID, will we want as many lectures as we had before? Or will in some way we be doing more of this flipped classroom, reading stuff online, interactive group sessions? What do you think? Maybe I'm going to start with Professor Chalam, because that was his core topic, really.
Yeah, we have to look at our curriculum and within the curricular content, some of them are simple basic recall, which the students can study on their own. But certain are higher cognitive domain topics or matter, and those can be covered in the flipped classroom format, so that the teacher devotes more time to those aspects which are not clear to the students, where there is a gap in the understanding of the student. And so as a resourceful teacher who is facilitator of learning, based on their experience, they can cite examples of and resources that are available that will shed light so that the students will have a full understanding of that topic and its relevance to their future role as doctors.
Thank you, Dr. Chacko. Professor Chalam, what will you keep?
Thank you, sir. See, we here, the faculty members and institution and the students have learned now new technique. We have learned something new, and definitely this is going to be useful post-COVID also. After COVID, now many times we used to hear from the teachers, faculty, that we don't have time to take all the classes or cover or uncover all the topics and syllabus, etc. Now, with these new things which we have learned, I don't think now the either student or the teacher will anytime complain about the non-availability of the time as far as theory classes are concerned. Yes. Second thing is, when you take theory classes online, definitely the time during the class, that is face-to-face discussion, we will use definitely to clarify the doubts, to make them understand, to make a higher level of understanding the like application, etc. So definitely post-COVID, everyone is going to use, and especially I'm very sure in my college, I'm principal of Bhaskar Medical College. I will be definitely ensure that this type of just cognitive teaching will go on to the online part, and then we will face to face. Definitely, we are going to use the time in the classroom for better understanding. Yes, we will do that.
There's a danger in saying that we don't need to deliver all of the knowledge content in lectures, which is that the content that you expect the students to know has no limits. There were a couple of comments in the chat about the challenges with the amount of information that you present students with, but I think maybe, can I ask Angela or Rita, or what do you want to comment on how you'll do things differently after all this?
May I speak?
Please, is that Rita? Yes.
Okay, yeah, this is me. You know, in my opinion, we are going to have blended forms of courses all over the world after this crisis. You know, our teachers and the students are adopted. Even my high school daughters, I can say that they do not tolerate to go back to that lecture-based or some kind of presentations that we had before this crisis. My smaller daughter, my younger daughter, she says to me that, "Mom, I would prefer to go to school for playing and teamwork, not listening to the lectures of my teachers. Online classes works the best." Okay, work the best. So these are the generation that are going to enter our universities, I want to say, and we have to change. But for me, as let's say medical doctor whose expertise is in e-learning, I worry a bit because I think that maybe bad models of e-learning or e-teaching are developed now in this crisis. And I hope that universities, medical educationists, and instructional designers could help university teachers and professors to deliver a well-designed e-learning course. You know, when the crisis is over, we should put time to add quality to these e-learning efforts as much as we can.
Yeah, well, that's a really, really good point. Getting the quality when we're in such a hurry to get online is a challenge. Angela, you and I both work in specialties with not very many representatives in Africa. So actually, I'm very well aware with the challenge of producing that specialty teaching across multiple medical schools.
You know, you're absolutely right. And I think for me, the change would be threefold. One, for me personally, I need to learn more about digital learning, and I want to thank you and your team for, you know, putting this forum together to empower us more on that. Secondly, will be to find out from the societies and the communities we serve, what are their needs and how can we tap onto the existing platforms? One of the challenges I know that we face is about the bandwidth. And so if internet connectivity is a challenge, then how do we move forward? Because learning should still continue. Then the other third tier or third level would be to engage policymakers and see how we can buy in, or rather convince them to buy into the idea to support digital learning. As was highlighted by one of the speakers, some of the most university curricula are designed for one-on-one interaction. But now moving forward, we need to support our learning institutions with the infrastructure to support digital learning. And for that, we need buy-in from the policymakers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think the really important question about bandwidth, quite a lot of what we've been talking about, not everything, has assumed that we can have simultaneous sessions with lots of people talking to each other. But I know that that is, well, in fact, people have already indicated that that's not possible in a good few of the countries that we hear from, or at least not possible for all students. However, I think one of the other things that's been raised is whether that's also a convenient excuse for some of the students who actually are not getting very engaged. And I do want to ask the panel again a question which has been recurrent, which there's a strong suspicion or knowledge in quite a few people's minds that a proportion of their students are not engaging with the online teaching. Now, clearly at one level, this is all going to come out in the assessment, if we can do robust assessment online, which is the subject of the next webinar next week. But I wonder whether anyone has any insights into the best way to manage this sort of problem. Can I just flag, I've picked a couple of people who have said that they would be prepared to give us 2 minutes on their local experience, and I'm just warning them to be ready. One is Dr. Padmini Venkataramani from Malaysia, who was going to tell us a little bit about their experience there, and Dr. Emad Nosser, who's going to talk about PBL, where the students in particular engage with each other. So that's just a couple of minutes each, but I'll ask this question first. Who wants to head off on that one?
Dr. Turner,
Kauser, I couldn't see you. Thank you. You're down the bottom of my screen. Please.
That's okay. We also had this concern, and one way in which our faculty tried to address it was that attendance is a mandatory thing. 75% attendance is mandatory by policy in our college. So what the faculty said that they stopped giving attendance to students just by logging in. And while they were giving these online sessions, because most of the sessions are conducted synchronously, they would stop and give a quiz or a question, and then they would want the students to answer that question. I mean, this was forced interaction, forced engagement, but that sort of made the students alert, and and only those who answered those questions which were coming in at intervals would be given an attendance. So that was one way that our faculty sort of dealt with it.
If you have a class of 250, that is quite an administrative task to sort out who is responsive.
We have a class of 350 to be to inform you, but all 350 don't come, of course. It goes up to 250 or 275. But what they did was that they have helpers along with them, you know, assistant teachers or demonstrators that are there, and they sort of divided the groups amongst themselves. So That was one way of letting the students know that they cannot turn on the computer and log on and then go to sleep or go and do something else. So, I mean, that was one way that we tried. Otherwise, the way that people have been doing it is by asking quizzes, by asking some students to respond, having Zoom cameras on. So that's the thing that they have done. Variety of techniques.
I find that our students love to turn the cameras off. But and again, that is the experience of some people down the side. Any other comments?
I feel, sir, I'm Dr. Chalam. I feel that the monitoring 300 students or 250 students online is easier than monitoring them in one single hall, because when I take class, when 200 people are sitting in one room, I cannot even see the faces of the last 3 rows. The last 50 students, I can't even see their face. I don't know what they are doing. I cannot communicate with them. Whereas here, I can see them individually and I can talk to them. So roll number 220, Ram, please talk. So I'm asking you a question, Geeta, talk. I'm asking you a question. And each student by name, I can see and talk to them. I think if you compare, really see, online monitoring of 250 students is easier than actually in classroom. You are talking about attendance. How many of your 250 students doing in a class are physically present, but mentally, how many they are present? They are mentally absent. Here,
I think that's a really important point. Having a rule about attendance doesn't tell you anything about whether they're engaged. And there is online at least the possibility of measuring their engagement. I want to just mention the flipped classroom concept, which again, not new, but adapted to online, which we've used very effectively in this kind of context, where the students read or watch or can learn about a topic before the session, and then in the session they maybe have a little bit of extra didactic material, but most of the time is spent giving the students in groups problems to solve. So in Zoom you can set up rooms. You can do the same in Collaborate, which is the Blackboard equivalent, and of course you can do the same in Microsoft Teams, and there are others as well. So you can set each group a problem to deal with, and then they are supposed to discuss it with themselves and come back, and the teachers can move through the rooms, and that is a really good point to test their understanding and also to see who's contributing to discussion. So quite hard work. Certainly takes more teachers and a lot more energy and thought than just delivering a lecture. Rita, please.
I would like to add a point. I wonder why, and I have time to do a research on it. But when it comes to e-learning, our professors and they become, they have an ideal approach. You know, when you are talking about a student's attention, you should compare e-learning environment or virtual environment with the real context of face-to-face education. If you have a 300 student class, we are sure that not all of them are listening. They are physically in the class, but not mentally. But when it comes to e-learning, I don't know why. We become ideal, we want everything to be perfect, and it can't be achieved. Be realistic and compare everything with the status that you have in your face-to-face traditional classes in the university. There are lots of questions raised for evaluation of e-learning courses and e-teaching. I always answer, look at the system, look at the quality that you have in your routine face-to-face classes. E-learning cannot add the quality more than, for example, 20%, because the reality is that. So we use engagement skills. We apply engagement skills to engage students and to improve students' motivation and interest in the course. But the same as face-to-face classes, we cannot do this for every individual student in the class. But I would like to ask participants that if you search with the words like a student engagement in e-learning environment or online environment, you can find valuable techniques and tricks to engage your students both for synchronous and asynchronous formats of course delivery. Thank you. Your microphone, Dr. Turner, please.
Thank you for that. I've got that now. I wonder whether, is Dr. Padmini Venkataramani online there?
Yes,
Ready to?
please.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Please.
Good evening, everybody.
Lovely,
Good
lovely
evening,
to hear you from
Dr.
Malaysia.
Good evening.
You were going to give us a
Thanks
couple of minutes on how things are working for you in Malaysia.
Okay. So I just want to thank the organizers and also the presenters for the excellent session and also giving me an opportunity to speak. I must say that we had a very organized response in our university. It seemed as if they were very well prepared for this disaster. I mean, they had a good disaster management team. And then initially itself, we had a totally student-directed learning and small group teaching in the clinical years. So what they did was they introduced a very robust faculty development for Microsoft Teams. And they also trained all the students before introducing it. And then we continued with the small group sessions. We had very few lectures in the clinical years, and mostly they were all seminars. And I must say, during the seminars, the students were very well behaved. They never did any writing on the slides, and they didn't have any extra songs. And they behaved with a lot of restraint. And they did it quite well, as if it was a face-to-face seminar. And the small group lectures also, all things were already on our LMS. We already had a Moodle. So we put everything on the LMS. Some of us took it as a flipped classroom, and some of us had a lecture itself and then followed by a Kahoot quiz. So this quiz was part of the formative assessment. And for the preclinical, they had large group teaching, and they also had something called integrated learning activity, which is like a PBL. So they managed to do it also. Initially, for the face-to-face, we used to have simulated patients, but this time they did it without the simulated patient, but they still had the questioning of the lecturer themselves, and then having a small group session, and then coming back later after a few days for the final session and so on. So that went on well. And the lectures also went on well, like this, using some engagement techniques. And for the year 4, all the projects that they had, the research, so instead of actual face-to-face questionnaire and everything, so they had to modify it a little bit and make it all online questionnaires. And some of the online projects are already done and they have come to us for marking. So things have been going quite well during the last few months. So I'm happy to share that with all of you.
That's really interesting.
And they have postponed all clinical classes to after the lockdown only. They didn't want to have anything during the lockdown. So all the students are in their houses. So they are planning to start in July.
Yeah.
They didn't want to risk doing, because it's medicine, and they didn't want to really try anything else.
That's
Thank
very
you very
interesting
much.
to hear, Padmini. I think if your institution can afford subscriptions to Microsoft, then Teams is excellent. And I'm sure one reason students behave well is because their names are up on the screen. They must use their institutional login to participate, which is not necessarily the case with all of the cheap solutions, but that sounds really good. Teams has upped its game, I think, during this. I've got. I'd like to move on quite quite shortly to Professor Liz Grant, but is Emad Nosser, are you online to tell us about a slightly different context of student groups in PBL?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My greetings from Sharjah, United Emirates, UAE. I am assistant professor of anatomy. This is my history route, but I'm educationist now, having MS in medical education, RCSI, and now I'm the head of assessment committee in the College of Medicine, University of Sharjah. Actually, we have our college adopts the PBL system 15 years ago. So we have old experience with dealing with PBL program, self-directed learning, and we have running these sessions in campus in short groups, about 8 to 10 students in every group. And actually, once this COVID era started, we found no problem. We divided the whole batch into rooms, groups, every group with their facilitator online, and all the batch have the same class in the same time. Actually, we prepare for that. We give them the scenario, written scenario of the problem every week. We have every week problem according to the system of the block or the unit. And actually that system, that scenario is delivered to students at the time of the start of session. Yeah, I mean, the students first will be exposed to the scenario at the start of the session. We don't give them online ahead. And during the session, the facilitator is allowing the students to open their videos, so as if we are looking at each other, because in PBL session, it is very important to observe the group interaction. Actually, PBL, I can see that it is very useful method for integrating students, because in PBL session, we don't deliver knowledge. Only we use the knowledge or the content of the problem for learning. And as all of you know, that PBL is having other skills like teamworking, leadership, critical thinking, problem solving, feedback, and every session we give a feedback to every student regarding punctuality, regarding participation, regarding his role in the group work. And after that, at the end of the week, there is another session where the students will show their learning by demonstrating whatever they're searching about the topics. And during the week, we give them what we call resource sessions, which are actually not didactic lectures, but interactive lectures. As many of you mentioned, that we give them the content in the form of task-based. I mean, a lot of questions, quizzes, problems. We ask them to search. We evaluate their attendance or their performance in PBL by CMAP. Every student has to prepare his own CMAP on the problem given from his point of view, and we discuss some of these CMAPs in the second session in the whole group. In addition, they have to give a research article. We recommend to them some research article related to the problem of the week. And in the second session also, we select one of these research articles to be generally discussed. Of course, we don't go for deep evaluation of the research of the article, but just what are the usefulness of this research, what are the defects, how about the sampling, basics of research understanding in year 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was very keen to get some comments on some groups where mostly students run, but it sounds as if all of yours have a facilitator or someone involved, or the other alternative, I guess, is to get the students to feedback on how much each other are contributing, perhaps. Dr. Chalam, I think you were you wanting to comment?
Sir, sir, I did get you. So please repeat the question. The students, how the students get into the, please, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, no, I thought you were looking to comment earlier. I was raising the question of less expensive ways of getting the students to work together and engage, and yet still get back reports on whether they are engaging, as an alternative to the posing them questions during the lecture and so on.
The online sessions are quite inexpensive. I feel so because we have mostly free softwares are available. And Google break rooms we have discussed. No, when we go into the break room, the teacher will be monitoring that, and they will be recording in the Google document what are the discussions going on. And they'll be in 10-15 minutes, whatever time you give, again they will come back to the plenary session and report what they have done in this period. So definitely they'll be engaged. No?
Thank you very much. I think we must ask Professor Liz Grant to come in at this point. I'm afraid so several people have come up with late offers to contribute their local experience. I'm not sure whether we'll have time to do that, and I'll just apologize, and we will try to incorporate invitations into future sessions. Liz, over to you, please.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers and to everyone who was contributing on the chat, because it's such a rich conversation we're having. But I think what's even more exciting than all the facts and the figures and the ideas is the fact that we are a global community talking together and sharing and learning and thinking about how medical education is changing and how each of us are change makers. So I really appreciate this. Just a few words Dr. Ali has asked me to say about the Global Health Academy, which is supporting these programs. Last week I was mentioning that the Global Health Academy was built on these three premises around that we're all equal, and that's still, I want to emphasize that equality of humanity that's it's so important that all students who come in to medicine understand about the equality. It's important for equity, it's important for justice reasons, it's important in all that we do that we treat each other equally. Also around the fact that our academy is built on an understanding that the answers to many of the world's questions are in the world already. We need to listen differently, and that there's no single solution. So even as we look at medicine and look at its interaction with other medical and nursing systems, we also need to understand its interaction with agriculture, with energy, with the health of the planet. The Global Health Academy has three strands, as it were, and the one that I just want to reference again is the strand of online education, because when it was set up as a virtual entity across the university and as a space for members to come in, our education was online. It was always online, and we have developed a number of online master's programs, and we're in the process of developing CPD online, because for partners, in many partner countries, and you can bear witness to that as well, it's very difficult for people to leave jobs that they're already in to take postgraduate education. But education should be available for everyone. So an online part-time program such as masters that can be offered for students who often are in work to do over 3 years. And for example, our master's programs run over 3 years with exit points at the end of each, a certificate at the end of first, a diploma, and then a master's over the third year, just to ensure that there's opportunity for everybody to engage, and that there's no chance that people start and then are really, if they are struggling because of external issues, that there is an exit point with something to deliver on that exit point. And this was the only other thing I'd like to reference is around that research and education has to go hand in hand. And as educators, we're researchers, as researchers, we're educators, and that these two should be prioritized together. And particularly in education, often teaching has sometimes is seen as something that isn't as valuable in some of the big research focused universities, and that shouldn't be the case, because these two are so integrated with that third part, that community of practice. So while the research that the Global Health Academy does around the obvious things, the infectious diseases, the non-communicable diseases, the neglected infectious diseases, the emerging diseases, we also look at life systems and life patterns, and look at areas such as family medicine, areas such as palliative care. We look at health system strengthening. So So finally, just a little invitation. If anyone wants to join the Academy, the membership is free. It's about communication and support together. There's a link on the website, and do email about joining to become a member and to share your experience and other ideas that you might have in how to build the global health community. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Liz. We're right up to the 2-hour mark, so I'm going to suggest we draw a line here and ask Ali to give some closing comments and say something about the next 2 planned webinars.
Thank you very much, Neil. To begin with, what I'd like to do is share the results of the survey that 92 of you very kindly filled out. So we had a good number, a good spread. So in connection with satisfaction with teaching students, I hope everybody could see this. You could see that the average rating that you gave was 3.5%, teaching students over an electronic platform. Then how satisfied did you think your students were with formal distance learning? So 3.2, I suppose, you know, there's a fair amount of ambiguity that can be interpreted from that. It seems like, you know, on one hand, people are satisfied, on the other hand, they aren't. How engaged are students with online teaching? So a moderate amount is what most of you felt was the case. Have people had training in e-learning? Well, surprisingly, I thought 45% of you did. I wasn't expecting that. And then how much of a role did you see for medical education delivery by e-learning after the COVID pandemic is over? A lot. So it is here to stay. Assessment of knowledge and application of knowledge, can it be assessed completely by e-assessment platforms? And a lot of you felt that it was possible. Could clinical skills be taught remotely? And that's, you know, for a discussion on the 27th, and of course the assessment part next week. But there's a lot of ambiguity and disagreement. A small percentage of you, however, felt that it is possible. And I think it probably to do with whether your discipline is about touching people, such as, you know, surgical disciplines or other disciplines. So thank you very much for this contribution. What I'll also do is take you, I'll send a link at the end of the webinar. I'll send a link for joining into the Global Health Academy. So next week's program is about assessment. And in our assessment program, we will be joined from Malaysia by Professor Shahid Hassan. Sorry, let me just come off the screen share here. So we'll be joined from Malaysia by Professor Shahid Hassan, from Pakistan by Professor Lubna Beg, and from Nepal by Dr. Sheetal Bhandari. And of course yourselves, who we'd be looking forward to contributing informally. Now, we had scheduled these programs for 90 minutes. We really thank you all for staying beyond the 90-minute mark. And I would propose that we would have next week's session onwards for 2 hours so that we make that official. And we'd like to have contributions from all over the world. But before I go, I'd like to thank the faculty, each one of you,